Regenerative medicine is an innovative field focused on repairing, replacing, or regenerating damaged tissues and organs. Unlike traditional treatments that aim to manage symptoms, regenerative medicine addresses the root cause of the problem, promoting natural healing and recovery. This approach can significantly improve quality of life, offering solutions for conditions that were previously thought incurable. Brooke Morrisseau started Givity Biologics to provide restorative and natural biologics with science based support. She joins us on the show today to share some of her groundbreaking findings. Brooke, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. I'm going to jump right into this because I have quite a few questions for you.
Perfect.
We got a lot to cover.
Perfect.
So, I want to start off just with an understanding of why Givity even came about. What is your story or journey that led up to the start of this company?
Got it. So it basically started with curiosity.
Hmm.
And for me, growing up in upstate New York, my dad had two major lessons.
Okay.
It was essentially you must apply yourself and you must work hard to get the results that you want from an asking question standpoint, but also a physical fitness standpoint. From there, I spent a lot of time swimming with the goal of trying to qualify for Olympic trials. So I was training like 3, 4 hours a day since I was like 10. And up to that point, um, I had gotten a scholarship to go to St. Bonaventure University and studying cell biology. And there, while swimming, I was getting very sick. I had a lot of autoimmune type reactions,
Wow.
was sick about once a month, and training 5 hours a day was not sustainable when you're trying to become a scientist. And most of the people on the team were just into business and spent a lot of time partying. So for me, I had to ask two questions. I said, do I want to be a professional athlete or do I want to try to become a scientist and a cell biologist full time? And that was really hard. That was like 10 years of efforts and dreams and aspirations leading up to that moment. And I'd had to decide to walk away. And that was tough.
I can't imagine.
Oh, yeah. So, with that, I found myself engrossed in personal development. So, it was almost like moving from arduous to momentum. It's like when you're starting something with a completely different identity, it's like you try to figure out answers for yourself. And I found that in the gym and in fitness. So, that's what I did, and then I ended up, moving back home, going to a smaller private college, and then becoming engrossed in science full time. It was 8 AM.
Never looked back?
No, no.
Okay, so
So
we started this new path. We're here now. We're going to the science
yeah,
world.
so that's what I did, and there I studied Alzheimer's research, cell and molecular biology, found it a lot of fun and speaking on stage and at conferences. But there along the way, I continued to pursue personal development, which really was my foundation that allowed me to be really good at those other things.
Yeah.
Um, Understanding physiology now, it makes sense as to why pursuing personal development would allow me to understand science on a really high level.
Hmm.
So it was a lot of fun. But along the way, I ended up doing 3 bodybuilding shows at the time. But it helped me become the best communicator, the best researcher, the best speaker because I had that foundation. And from there, I ended up moving back home at the start of COVID,
Mm.
and I ended up pursuing a master's in physique enhancement at the University of South Florida.
Okay.
Well, there it was the idea behind that was I really enjoyed science and I loved bodybuilding and fitness and personal development. So I thought that by combining the two, going to the only program in the United States that was able to combine the two, I would be able to figure out some things that I didn't, figure out before and help others in a more impactful way. So there, I ended up teaching online weight management, creating courses for the university, was the director of the USF's Physique Enhancement Lab,
My
did the
goodness.
community testing.
Where'd you have time to do all this?
That's the point, but it's like
Yeah.
the one thing that's so important is the foundation in personal development and making sure that I took time to reflect, to appreciate the process of becoming something more.
Well said.
So that was my thing. And then along the way, I had a nutrition company at the same time and was helping others, I call like self actualize. So become who they're supposed to become, to have this experience through the variety of ways. So I did that. And following that, at the completion of the master's degree at around 3 years, I ended up getting into a car accident.
Oh,
So the story up to now was necessary to tell because if I didn't tell that story, the car accident wouldn't have made much sense as to why that was so like
full.
impactful to me because up to that point I was able to create an identity rooted in science and communicating about science, but used fitness as the foundation that kept me all together and aligned from a health standpoint, but also appreciating the personal development progression
Of
process.
course. Yeah.
So when that all happened, um, I was employed at the university at the time, still running the nutrition business, but the car accident was very, very bad
Mm.
because it took away basically my ability to practice fitness, but also from a place of integrity, it was really hard for me to communicate and help inspire others while being in a place of not being able to live up to the standard that I was like proposing. So I decided to completely just let the fitness company go
Mm.
because I couldn't show up and empower other people to be more from a place of lack. And I know so many people or influencers or coaches are like, "Oh, that's just part of it." But for me, it was everything that I do must be coming from a place of integrity and being able to do it yourself, or
Hmm.
else you're just kind of working a job rather than this is just who you are. So that's the reason why that stopped. But the car accident resulted in a partially torn ligament on my left leg,
Oof.
my left kneecap, and then all the little facet joints in your neck, they have a bunch of musculature around them, and they were all partially torn. So at 23, at this time, I was unable to really turn my neck or work out anymore. And I was like, "Well, I don't
Coming from a
know."
world where you did
Yeah,
literally bodybuilding
yeah,
competitions to not even being able to turn your neck and
do
having those
anything.
issues. I can't even imagine rectifying
Mhm.
that change to your life.
Yeah, it was tough.
Yeah.
So during that process, though, I really got an opportunity to ask a lot of questions about, well, what do I actually want to do? But also, I was employed at the university at the
Mhm.
time to teach, and I let that go. So it was just this shift and a complete identity shift, completing something that 7 years of school straight, no breaks, and then left in a position of losing your physical identity, having to recreate yourself to become something aligned but different. But for me, it was interesting because when I reflect back on like how I was doing in undergraduate school, performing at a high level in fitness, but that was the foundation for my science. I loved science. I loved the curiosity and the process. So instead of just kind of taking like a victim mindset and going, well, this is it, like, I'm not going to do anything, like, I'm going to have to be on medications, I'm not going to be able to turn my neck, I'm not going to work out ever again. Um, During that recovery process, which I'll get into, which was interesting, which really sparked the why as I further got into Jevity. Um, I forgot where I was.
Talking about when you decided that
Oh,
you did
yes. Okay,
not
got
want
it.
you weren't going to let this hold you back
Got it.
necessarily.
Got it.
Yeah.
Yes. All right. So upon the car accident, I had to make a decision and a choice and take responsibility, even though it was painful, to choose to find a different way and really come out of the gate from 7 years of school, having no guarantee of any of this working, and started asking questions specifically about myself within my own partially torn ligament and then the neck.
The neck issue.
The solutions w- provided to me were really eye-opening as to what many people go through in the traditional healthcare model,
Okay.
which I I was unaware of because I've never experienced
This is your first time being,
loss
yeah.
or anything like this.
Mhm.
So the process in summary looked a lot like going to chiropractic care, where they wanted you to go 4 to 6 hours a week, which was helpful for what it was. But we ended up getting imaging back, and the answer was you must get surgery on your left leg. And we were sent to all these different doctor's appointments, basically to build a case to utilize for the car accident. And at that time, I'm just like, this isn't really doing anything for me. And they basically prescribed me a bunch of pills that I didn't take. And
That's
then
a
they
whole
said,
nother
yeah,
conversation. Yeah.
23, at 23,
Yeah.
it was like, you have to get surgery on your knee.
Mm.
Why? I said, why do I have to get surgery on my knee? I said, I'm very strong. I said, it's partially torn.
Mhm.
We can't do anything. And the advice was, you should just take time off from working out and you should get surgery.
Mm.
And those are the two things from a training standpoint. You train to increase blood flow to that area to help recover that area. And you further build up the tissue around the partially torn ligament so it doesn't hurt really. So I started getting into the biologic space just from my curiosity of science. Um,
To know what other options you had outside
correct.
of this. Stop working out, get the surgery.
Correct.
Mhm.
So I said no to surgery, and I finally asked the question, well, what about biologics? Can we utilize stem cell therapy or biologic like products to help restore the partially torn ligament and then restore my neck? And at the time, this was being covered by insurance. So they said, I've got one. I found one for you, and it's in St. Petersburg, Florida.
Okay.
So, and at the time I was living in
Daytona. Daytona.
Daytona Beach at the time, and then I drove down. But I was surprised because it was going to be covered by insurance. However, it didn't address umbilical cord tissue. I said, what is this stem cell therapy that we're going to do? And they explained a process called bone marrow aspirate concentrate. Have you heard of that?
I have not.
No.
Bone marrow.
So I hadn't either at the time. But I was just getting into the space, so I was familiar with bone marrow aspirate concentrate. I was familiar with PRP,
Mhm.
umbilical cord tissue biologics, as well as amniotic fluid derived biologics. So I had some understanding, but really through the experience, I really learned. So a bone marrow transplant or a bone marrow um, aspirate concentrate is short for they're going to shove a metal rod in your back
Mm.
without any pain medications, um, not sedated, no anesthesia or nothing. And they're going to take out a little piece from your bone in your hip and they're going to spin it down under a hood and use different preservatives to basically create more stem cells out of your own bone tissue. You heard of that before?
No, but you're not
No?
selling it very well if you're trying
No,
to sell it. I imagine you're not, but I just gotta say I
no,
am, like,
no.
cringing inside as she's describing that process. My goodness, okay.
So that's what so on the yeah, so on the market, most people associate stem cell
Yeah,
without a proper definition of what that could be, and
mm,
there's many different things. So
yeah,
from
I'm coming from that perspective where I wasn't aware of all these different types of
there's a
ways of
bunch.
retrieving stem cells, so
Correct.
this is fascinating for me. Yeah.
Yes. So basically what happens, and this is really leads into the next part of the story, of discovery based on curiosity, is it was really painful.
Yeah.
As you know with the story, I've experienced extreme things, like extreme academic achievements, extreme physical events. Like bodybuilding is a mindset sport, but it's also an
Physically
exercise
demanding,
of
yeah.
discipline. So I ended up doing that was hard. That's so hard, but it is so cool. But with the bone marrow aspirate concentrate, it was so painful. It was very traumatizing. Even to this day, I look back and I reflect on it, and I'm just like that probably was one of the most painful things I've ever done.
Wow.
And that really made me ask why. Number one, it was very painful. But number two, the owner of that facility ended up combining umbilical cord tissue biologics with the bone marrow aspirate in the treatment protocol. So when you think about what I'm about to tell you is I was a patient 3 or 4 weeks later that started getting all these skin reactions,
Mm.
like all these hives breaking out. Um, every night around 7 p.m., I'd start like sweating and like feel like I was like just ran. Um, and when you think about our physiology, we're made of a bunch of undifferentiated, multipotent mesenchymal stem
Right.
cells. So if you're truly going in, and whether that's from myself or from a donor, why why would the body be responding to something that either comes from you or originally was you at one time, and that you're made of all of this on the cellular level? Why would that be happening if
A
that's
reaction.
supposed to be from what you're made of?
Mm.
Um, I asked that question, and I asked the providers that question. I asked the scientists that question that created the product. And at the time as well, I was doing biological sales for a manufacturing company out of California. So that's what I ended up doing. And they couldn't answer the question. And you start asking a lot of the providers that were buying their tissue, and a lot of their patients were having all
And
these
similar
adver
reactions.
and I said, "Why?" And you ask the providers and they go, "Well, we don't know. They told us." And then you ask them and they say, "Well, that's normal."
Mm.
So from a place of curiosity and you start asking questions, you could dive into the literature and figure out what preservatives these products are being preserved in. Most of the literature in research is preserving products with a 10% DMSO preservative. Are you familiar with DMSO?
I'm not.
Okay, so DMSO is dimethyl sulfoxide.
Mhm.
Dimethyl sulfoxide back in the 1960s comes from recycled paper.
Hmm.
Yes,
Okay.
yes,
I'm intrigued.
yes. So at the time in the 1960s, the FDA was like, this is not safe to put in people because it's going to cause all of these
Yeah.
reactions. And due to popular demand, like overnight, they started using this preservative to preserve the pharmaceutical
Mm.
products. And if you look up DMSO, you'll see that there's a lot of adverse skin reactions as well as
Just like what
histamine.
you experienced.
It's same thing of what I
Yeah.
experience. So if something is supposed to come either from you or be something that's a part of you, whether it's from an age zero umbilical cord or whether it's from you at this current moment in time, it should not cause a
Mm.
reaction because it's called immunoprivileged.
Mm.
So this is all public knowledge. This is in the literature. And it explains all the potential risk of adverse skin reactions. And most of these companies that are creating biological products that respect and utilize scientific research and literature as they should, but have never asked the question, what would happen if I didn't put that in there
Mm.
anymore? Would this actually cause the patient's skin reactions? Nobody can answer that question. And most of the big companies today preserve their products in DMSO. And it's still the same story of the adverse skin reactions. Um, that shouldn't happen. So it was interesting because a lot of the providers I was doing business with or starting to do business with at the time, they were intrigued by the question. And a lot of them ended up asking me all these questions, and I would go out and I would use the literature and provide them all the papers and support it and be like, well, this could be it, but ultimately it's up to you as a physician to make the best decision for your
Of
patient,
course, yeah.
because we can't, as a company, from an education standpoint, but also if you're in the business of distributing biologics, you can't really tell a physician what to do, but you can educate them in a way utilizing the literature for them to come up with their own decisions. And most companies at the time were like, well, that doesn't matter. That does matter because if your heart and integrity is in the provider and the best patient outcome, if they choose to utilize that for their patients, then you should care about those things. If you're not in the business to make a bunch of money and not tell the truth. So supporting the science in this case from a research standpoint, it would make sense. But if you're influencing or educating others on this to then have the result or outcome of them purchasing something from you to them have the education to make an informed decision for whatever they want to use it for, then I would say that's a responsibility on either the company or the person supporting that company to be able to explain that. But the problem is they couldn't answer those questions, and the providers would have to go out and figure it out for themselves. So most of the industry up to this time was very similar to what it was like before there was a real estate agent similar to a real estate transaction.
Okay.
So it's very similar to you have a home buyer or a home seller who wants to sell a home, and you have all these buyers out here that want to buy the home. Could you imagine if the buyers of the homes would be able to just call all the owners all the time whenever they wanted to ask all these questions? The owners would just, I just want to sell my
Yeah,
house.
you gotta have a middle
Like, I
person.
just want to make sure that, you're the right person, and it was just a big pain in the butt.
Mhm.
So, Jevity, in my mind, when it was created, was a solution that could allow these manufacturing companies to bring their products to market if they were doing things to the top 1% of the standard, and then for all these providers or researchers or individuals who wanted to utilize umbilical cord tissue to do the things that they want to do with it, which could be make the decision and choice to apply it to to their patients, to do further research on it, um, or utilize it in any way that they wanted to. There's no gap that bridged a really cool scientist who made a really cool product, which is what he was best at, and a provider who's a medical professional that was not educated on any of this, who then has to make a decision for their patient because understanding the physiology of these biologics is a really cool tool in a provider's tool belt if their intent is getting the best patient outcome. If the intent is making a bunch of money, then you could probably stick in the lane of insurance or pharmaceutical
Mhm.
based practice. But if your true intent, heart, and desire is to have the outcome of the patient be the best it can be,
Mhm.
and they can call you up and tell the story of, wow, you helped me so much and I'm actually getting better. If you want to increase the likelihood of that happening, there should be something for you to consider about cash pay biologics. And the thing about Jevity is with this approach, every provider that was either approached or educated, nobody said no. So Jevity was built based on demand and curiosity to go out and find the best answers possible so somebody could make an informed decision to have the best outcome.
Wow, that's
So
incredible.
that's kind of the story
That's
of the brand.
incredible, incredible. Thank you for the backstory, for diving
You're
into that.
welcome.
Talking about providers, what are the current challenges that these practices are facing when it comes to finding the right provider of stem cell products? Obviously, there is a plethora of these companies that are doing that,
Yeah,
providing these. So, what would you say are those current challenges?
good question. So I would break it down into there's really five main problems. One being product quality and physician education. Two being the cost. Biologic applications for patients were like really expensive.
Mm.
And it's because companies mark up the product so much to make a bunch of money so then they can go out and sell them and do what they want and still have a profitable manufacturing business. Um, so cost is a problem. If the goal is to help as many people as possible, then this shouldn't be that expensive.
Mm.
Delivery problems. Providers were essentially depending on manufacturing companies to deliver products that didn't understand how they were supposed to be running a business. So we would describe it as like a la-di-da attitude of they
Mhm.
got their order, we got it, we'll deliver it. Maybe it won't be on time. So that was a huge problem that you have to deal with in biologic sales. And when the company that you're working with can't deliver and understand what the customer or the provider really needs, it becomes a really big problem. So that was also a problem. One big one is business and personal development.
Okay.
Doctors' offices, providers, or those interested in getting into the business of helping patients and serving others outside of traditional insurance, um, they are not formally trained in business, and business is code word for how willing how far am I willing to go on a personal development journey which should result in business success. Because if you're committed to becoming the best version of yourself and you're able to influence others through becoming that version of you, then money should be a byproduct of that.
Yeah.
So that a lot didn't understand that, not their fault. From a place of like respect and empathy, they were trained to practice medicine, not do business. And there are providers out there who can do business, but it's really about how can you capture your unique story in a way that's powerful to attract the patient that you want while going out and doing marketing and sales in a way that's effective and impactful while you have to practice medicine. There was nothing out there to really bridge the gap between the two, but then over deliver and like be there to support somebody with becoming the best version of themselves. Because that's code word for I have to face the fears of everything that I am up to this moment in time to step into something to create something new. That's really what that means. So when you talk to somebody to become that, you need someone to support you along the way.
Absolutely.
And that's usually a physician or somebody who you want to be like, who's done it successfully to guide you.
Hmm.
So that was a problem. And to touch back on the product quality and education piece, the skin reaction problem was huge and very, very common. So providers on the educational piece, understanding what umbilical cord tissue biologics really are, quite literally down to a cellular level, is very important. They were not taught this in school, so they have to take the initiative and accept the responsibility that I have to go out and I have to learn this at the highest level to be able to apply this on my patients.
Hmm.
Um, there was really no program to bridge the gap between the two. There was companies with trainings, but the best experience would be providers showing up to get trained about how to buy their products and then be handed a price list and some educational guides, and they still left with, "I still have no idea what to do, and I do not
More
know how."
questions than answers.
Correct.
Mm.
And the last one that is very apparent, but also kind of hidden under the rug and not really discussed is two big fears. One, compliance. Like, how can you do cash pay biologics and be compliant from an FDA standard, but also an FTC standard as well?
Mm.
Those two things can completely destroy somebody's reputation from a physician providing this to patients.
Mm.
So, if an FDA regulates manufacturing practices, so that's on the manufacturers or the product creators to follow the systems and processes required to make a good product. That's what the FDA regulates. The FTC regulates what you can and cannot say regarding biologics and what they can and cannot do for your patients from a front facing media
I
standpoint.
see.
So that's interviews like this.
Hmm.
Um, you have to be very careful about making
The language
claims
that you're using.
because that's what really ultimately gets you in trouble. And nobody that I was aware of could be able to understand what those guidelines are and develop some systems and processes behind keeping the provider's best interests in mind regarding the FTC. Because ultimately, they can do whatever they want with their patients. Nobody's going to take that away from you. But there are people out there that are watching you and watching your social media posts. And this could be an accumulation of years of gathering evidence just because you're doing things that are making claims about certain biological products, about what they can and can't do to combat certain chronic disease conditions that the pharmaceutical industries own those names to. So that's where it becomes a problem. It's not because umbilical cord tissue allograft cannot support these inflammatory issues. It's about what you can and cannot say because somebody else owns that name, and you're walking a very fine line, and that's something that a lot of providers need to understand. And if they don't care, they will care when they get an FDA or an FDC warning letter, and then now you're made an example of.
Hmm.
So if you don't if a provider or somebody using umbilical cord tissue biologics does not care enough to address those issues, you may not be worried now, but 3, 4 years from now, when a pile of papers is stacked on your desk with like what are you gonna say? I didn't know?
Yeah, a nice
Like,
hefty fine.
no, a fine.
Yeah.
I mean, you're done. I mean, you're completely done. And you spent 30 years building a reputation to practice medicine,
Hmm.
to to I can't even find the words to explain, like, the level of responsibility that you have to take ownership for making sure you check all the boxes, and the "I don't care" attitude is unacceptable.
I hear in your voice how passionate you are
It's
about this
so
topic.
important.
Yeah.
I mean, there's clinic owners that I know to this day that every time they wanna go take out either a loan from the bank or do a business deal, years later, have to explain that FDA warning letter
Mm.
every time they wanna do something.
Hmm.
Um,
Follows them for the rest of their.
and even if your intent isn't bad, it's the answer of "I don't know" is so unacceptable because it's literally right out there, and there's cases being published every month about certain companies being shut down.
How can Jevity help with this? And I'm sure maybe there's some people watching who are even wondering during this conversation if they're the right fit for Jevity, if they could be clientele of Jevity. So maybe you could also get into who you serve and how you help
Mhm.
with these issues that we're discussing, these challenges.
Got it, good question. It is, how can we help with the FTC and
Mhm.
FDA issues? It really comes down to your marketing. So we'd built Jevity Regenerative Marketing in-house of the education company to help providers not only get education on what it looks like to be FTC compliance, but work with them from a creative standpoint to help them position and tell their story in a way that's impactful to attract the right patient, but say it in a way that isn't going to get you completely shut down.
Right.
Um, so there's that from a marketing standpoint, but from who we work with or who's really our ideal provider, um, I could start listing names of different physicians or types of groups or things. But before I do that, it's really those committed to personal development and unafraid and willing to take a different approach that's different from most,
Mhm.
but that's really a commitment to self-development because this is challenging doing it the right way
Of course.
at the highest level and it is work.
Doing
But
that
but
thing
it's
with
a
my
lot
heart
of
soon.
yeah, no, but it's a lot of fun, and the team really helps you edify, yourself and communicate in a powerful way and be supported by people who have done it.
Hmm.
And those people can look like pain management physicians, CRNAs, anesthesiologists, cosmetic dentists, TMD or TMJ joint dentists. There's dentists, I didn't even know this before diving deep into it, that just treat sleep. So you
Wow.
can do biologic applications in that way as well to,
Mm.
to help that process. But really it's rooted in the aesthetic applications from a face standpoint, a hair restoration standpoint, um, and just from a physiology standpoint, I'm not making any claims about what the products can and can't do. I just want to make that very
Of
clear.
course.
But from a science based literature view, the physiology of these biologics are designed to decrease inflammation in the body to allow the body to leverage its immune system to increase the likelihood that it's going to
Mm.
be able to repair itself. That's what it does.
And those are pretty much just the benefits, of course, of
Correct.
biologic products.
Correct.
So then what makes your products innovative compared to other companies? How are you differentiating yourself?
Good question. So I love this question because it's an answer based on understanding umbilical cord tissue physiology.
Okay.
So it's not one product that's going to be this end all be all thing because if you're doing it or going about it the right way, every company should be offering the same
Mm.
products.
But they're not.
They're not, and there's reasons for that, but I can try to explain it in a simple way
Okay.
from an umbilical cord tissue physiology standpoint. It's when you have an umbilical cord tissue and you chop it in half, very weird. Sorry, I like it. So if you imagine that,
Okay.
are you a
Yeah,
mom?
yeah.
Are you-
I am not.
okay,
This is a good time for the interview. So
okay, good. So okay, if you chop an umbilical cord in half, you'll see something called gelatinous tissue with blood vessels and veins and all of these other things to keep it structurally together. If you remove all the structural things, there's this thing called Wharton's jelly. Wharton's jelly is a very thick gelatinous tissue. It contains, are you familiar with hyaluronic acid? You've heard of that, right?
I am
No?
not, girl.
Okay.
You're bringing all the
So,
education to me, and I'm loving it. Please tell me.
so we have like hyaluronic acid. We have things that create collagen.
Oh,
Have
the
you heard?
acne, hyaluronic.
Yes, there's a lot of, yes,
Yeah.
hyaluronic acid
All
is
right.
used
Yes.
to, in a
Familiar.
lot of
Yes, and
facial
facial
application
things
products.
and
Correct.
with skin fading, dark
Collagen,
spots and then collagen. Yes, of
collagen.
course. All of
Yeah.
these things from the
Okay.
stem cells of the
Got it.
umbilical cord.
Got it.
Yeah.
Yes. So it contains all of these cells that help restore the extracellular matrix, really in the face.
Okay.
It could because you look into it and it contains hyaluronic acid, collagen, fibroblasts, cytokines. That's code word for leveraging the body's immune system. It contains mesenchymal stem cells. Everybody's familiar now with the word stem cells,
Yeah.
but it's pronounced mesenchymal stem cells or mesenchymal stem cells. Um, and then inside of those mesenchymal stem cells are exosomes. Okay, does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay,
Absolutely.
so in summary, you have three things. You have a Wharton's jelly, which contains mesenchymal stem cells, which contains inside exosomes.
Yeah.
There's a variety of different things from a physiology standpoint that they do. Mesenchymal stem cells are the actual cells. So when you think about stem cell therapy, that's what it is. It's mesenchymal stem cells. So a lot of companies you'll see internationally doing biological infusions or stem cell therapy infusions. That's what it is. And inside of the mesenchymal stem cells, again, are exosomes. Exosomes communicate with uh, the body's immune system to signal something to happen, to communicate with different areas in the body to do something and send the body's resources to that area, which involves increasing blood flow to increase the potential to decrease the inflammation to allow the body to heal itself. That's what it does from a physiology standpoint.
Wow.
So, and that's really important because when you think about exosomes, this is where it could get tricky if you're somebody, whether you're a potential patient or you're a potential provider of these biologics, that you need to understand so you can choose the very best products to increase the likelihood of the best patient outcomes. A lot of companies are marketing that they have stem cell products, or we have stem cells, or we have exosomes. But when you think about that and you understand what I just described from a basic physiology of umbilical cord, it makes you ask the question, is the exosome product I'm getting at my office, or is the sales rep that's showing up at my office with this paper and order form,
Mhm.
is what they say is exosomes? Is it truly exosomes, or is it exosomes with different growth factors combined
Mixed in,
into
right,
it
right.
to increase the particle count, which makes it appear like the best product? And if it's at a very, 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 very cheap, cheap price, you need to ask that question because it probably contains exosome particles with exosome type growth factors as well. That's not exosomes. What I just described, umbilical cord tissue exosomes
Mhm.
coming from the inside of them, that is a true
Yeah.
exosome. And you can tell from the particle size. So different products that can contain beyond just exosomes will contain things called microvesicles and apoptotic bodies. So that those are collectively termed extracellular vesicles. Amniotic fluid derived exosomes, they are extracellular vesicle type products. They contain exosomes with microvesicles and apoptotic bodies. Now, when you ask the question, what are those, which we did collectively from a provider and scientific team, you start to understand that microvesicles is just a secret word for something that carries a bunch of exosomes around, which has about a 10x particle size than just exosomes. And apoptotic bodies are a byproduct of cells that die. So when a cell dies, it's termed apoptosis. It, it basically commits suicide,
Mm.
is the cell. So what's left over are these apoptotic bodies. And when you ask the question, well, what does that do? Is that going to actually help somebody? In the literature, a lot of people with autoimmune diseases, a lot of their symptoms come from the failure to remove apoptotic bodies. So if you're looking into biologic products and it contains extracellular vesicles, it likely contains those two things. And if you're a physician who wants to increase the likelihood of maybe controlling somebody's autoimmune type conditions, we probably shouldn't make the decision to choose a product that contains apoptotic bodies because it could have the likelihood of making their immune system autoimmune disease, maybe even worse, because it contains that.
Right.
But we would have never understood that if we didn't ask the question, what is that? And understand from a cellular level, like what does this actually do? And how can this be drawn back out and impact the thing that everybody matters the most, the patient outcome. So that's really important to understand. And so many companies that come out with these biological products that are marketing exosomes or stem cells, you have to ask, if you're a provider watching this or somebody, maybe even a patient watching this, you have to ask yourself better questions to then be able to ask them better questions. And if they can't come up with answers, if they can't come back with third party lab reports, if they can't explain to you if the product is an exosome product or an extracellular vesicle product, if they cannot explain to you the difference between those two things, they probably don't even know what they're selling you.
Mm.
And I speak from experience because I was the rep trying to sell to physicians trash, and I didn't know any better. And
Well, that adds to your qualifications to
Cor-
even now be in this position with Gevity to help others to market their products.
Correct.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes, you have to understand what you're getting.
Hmm.
I'm trying to think of something that's relatable. It's almost like maybe some people watching this
Anything you're putting in
like
your
weight
body,
like
really.
protein powder. All
Sure.
right, we go into GNC. There's 1,000 different protein powders,
Hmm.
but what's the best protein powder? Well, what about that sweetener? Well, what about the other sweetener? There's all these little nuances within everything that you do that matter. So I know the biologics and the stem cell business is taking off more than ever within the next 3 years. It's happening. Um, so it's a responsibility for us as scientific communicators, consultants, distributors, distribution companies, even down to the ones making the product to understand that the one thing that matters the most is the patient outcome. And if you truly care about your patient outcome, you will care about how you communicate about this stuff to protect yourself and your patients. And you will care about the quality of the product you're getting. And if you don't, I would start asking better questions.
Wow,
So,
powerful.
yeah,
Powerful, Brooke. Thank you so much for joining us.
you're
That's
welcome.
I mean, you blow me away. A
You're
lot of
welcome.
really important information that we've shared and we've talked about. Do you have any closing thoughts, or what is the key takeaway that you hope everyone watching is going to take away from this conversation?
I would say one thing is you have to know where you're going and you have to know with who. And the who will, in this space, the who really does go down to who really knows what they're talking about and who can explain questions um, that others can't. And if they can't, you should be able to answer those questions yourself. And the last thing I'll say is you have to ground yourself in the foundational physiology so you can make informed decisions to help other people the way that you want to help them. And anybody that truly knows me and asks me scientific questions, I always go back to this like 5 different photos which explain umbilical cord tissue physiology for them to draw their own conclusions based on what they understand. And that's the most important thing.
Love your passion for the subject. I love what you're doing at Givity to share your knowledge with the world and help people make better informed decisions. We are very appreciative of you, and
Thank
once
you.
again really enjoyed this conversation. For those of you at home, if you would like more information on Givity Biologics, you can head over to givity.com. That is GGEVITYY.com. Thank you for watching.